does not prevent initiation of proceedings under Section 74. The petitioner challenged a GST demand and penalty order issued by the superintendent, making the writ petition under Section 226 of the Constitution of India non-maintainable. 122 was appropriately can be applied for a non-fraudulent case is the question. According to my dear friend, the assessee filed a review application. Under this section, Section 67, power of inspection, search and seizure provides for, my dear friends, although the Supreme Court declined to tag this matter with similar pending cases, a consolidated approach is both necessary and appropriate, except the ground of fraud or any willful misstatement or suppression of facts, to evade tax for periods rather than the CGST context, particularly involving fraud, justifies a different interpretative approach. GST Judicial Outlook from Supreme Court and various high courts across the country. My dear friends, GST Judicial Outlook number 1 is from Madras High Court, Insuria Express Cargo vs. Union of India, writ petition number 22035 of 2025. My dear friends, in this case, it was held, officer must try other modes of service of notice if no reply was filed to portal notice, said High Court. My dear friends, the facts of the case is merely uploading notices or communication under the View Additional Notices tab on the GST portal is considered valid service under the law. We all know that nowadays the GST notices are served through online mode, through portal, wherein you go and check by placing your GST number, you enter the portal and you can see that the GST notice is served in the portal. In that case, however, this form of service may not be effective if the taxpayer remains unaware of the uploaded notice. Where the uploaded notice is not known to the assessee, then he may not reply the amount to ex parte order. We all know well. Considering this matter, in this case, the impugned order was passed without granting the petitioner a personal hearing. So, personal hearing was not granted because the petitioner was not aware of the notice uploaded on the portal, thereby violating principles of natural justice. Effective communication of the notice is necessary to enable the taxpayer to respond or appear. If a taxpayer, my dear friends, it's a very, very important point to be noted. If a taxpayer fails to respond to repeated notices via a particular mode, example, portal upload, the proper officer as provided in the GST law must exercise due diligence and not merely repeat the same method without reassessment. Because at the end of the day, the officer who is sitting to serve these notices is concerned about the revenue. If he is concerned about the revenue, from the revenue perspective, he should ideally choose other modes of service to communicate to the assessee. He can't keep uploading the notices only in the portal. Considering this, it is very important to understand Section 169 subsection 1 of the GST law, both CGST as well as SGST or UGST. So what does Section 169 subsection 1 say? A very important point to be noted. Under the Goods and Service Tax Act, both under the CGST as well as SGST, Section 169 is a very, very important section. My dear friends, Section 169 provides for service of notice in certain circumstances. Very important. Service of notice in certain circumstances. Section 169, subsection 1 provides for any decision, order, summons, notice or other communication under this act or the rules made thereunder shall be served. Very important. Shall be served by any one of the following modes, namely by giving or tendering it directly or by a messenger including a courier to the addressee or the taxable person or to his manager or authorized representative or an advocate or a tax practitioner holding authority to appear in the proceedings on behalf of the taxable person or to a person regularly employed by him in connection with the business or to any adult member of family residing with the taxable person, or B, registered by registered post or speed post or courier with acknowledgement due to the person for whom it is intended or his authorized representative, if any, at his last known place of business or residence, or C, by sending a communication to his email address provided at the time of registration or as amended from time to time, or D, by making it available on the common portal, or E, by publication in a newspaper circulating in the locality in which a taxable person or the person to whom it is issued is last known to have resided, carried on business or personally worked for gain, or if none of the modes opposite is practicable, by affixing it in some conspicuous place at his last known place of business or residence, and if such mode is not practicable for any reason, then by affixing a copy thereof on the notice board of the office of the concerned officer or authority who or which passed such decision or order or issued such summons or notice. My dear friends, this is about section 169 subsection 1. So section 169 subsection 1 of the CGST Act or the SGST Act or the UGST Act, as the case may be, various valid methods of service. Under that, email and RPAD. Email and RPAD is one of the modes of communication. If there is no acknowledgement or response through one method, other prescribed modes, especially RPAD, should be explored to ensure actual receipt or effective service. My dear friends, since there was no effective service or opportunity to be heard, the impugned order was set aside because the proper officer was uploading the notice continuously only in the common portal. That is one of the modes of service and not the only mode of service. If the assessee has not responded, he should have resorted to multiple modes of service. In that case, assessee was not informed about the impugned order. So, knowing it well, Madras High Court has set aside the impugned order. The matter was remanded, reinforcing the requirement for authorities to follow proper and practical service procedures in line with the intent of the GST Act. My dear friends, the intent of section 169 of the CGST Act or SGST Act or the UGST Act, as the case may be, was to ensure that the assessee is sent notice, modes of service, to ensure that he is intimated. So, RPAD is one of the traditional modes of service and not the only mode of service. So, we all know that GST has come with a tech platform, but the question comes whether a trader or any person will have access to the common portal. Generally, the GST consultants only file the return. In that case, modes of service was provided under the GST law, contemplated in the GST law under section 169 only to ensure the assessee gets the notice and intimated. It was held by Madras High Court in case of Insuria Express Cargo versus Union of India, WP number 22035 of 2025. GST Judicial Outlook number 2. It is a matter concerning Authority for Advance Ruling, Kerala. Neeta Gelatin India Limited, INDRE, Kerala 19/2025. My dear friends, under this Authority for Advance Ruling, it was held fresh water storage and effluent storage tank being part of plant and machinery of manufacturing is eligible for ITC, Authority for Advance Ruling, Kerala. My dear friends, the facts of the case is the fresh water storage tank and effluent guard pond are integral to the appellant's core manufacturing operations and not merely ancillary or administrative structures. Despite being constructed with civil materials, the tanks serve process-specific roles like fluid storage and effluent treatment, making them functionally equivalent to equipment or apparatus, thus qualify as plant and machinery under the GST law. The applicant's classification of these assets as plant and machinery in their books is not decisive. In their books is not decisive, but it supports the functional assessment necessary for GST input tax credit eligibility, ITC eligibility. Accordingly, my dear friends, since the tanks are established as part of the production infrastructure and not immovable property of an administrative or non-operational nature, the restrictions under section 17 subsection 5 clause C and section 17 subsection 5 clause D of CGST Act or SGST Act or the UGST Act, as the case may be, do not apply. Do not apply. Now, it is very important, my dear friends, what is section 17 subsection 5 clause C is very important to be understood by all of you. Section 17 subsection 1 clause 5 provides for blocked credit. Section 17 subsection 5 provides for notwithstanding anything contained in subsection 1 of section 16 and subsection 1 of section 18, input tax credit shall not be available in respect of the following, namely, under that you have clause C, which provides for works contract services supplied for construction of an immovable property other than plant and machinery, except where it is input service for further supply of works contract service. And that is section 17 subsection 5 clause C. My dear friends, under that we also have section 17 subsection 5 clause D, wherein goods or services are both received by a taxable person for construction of an immovable property other than plant or machinery on his own account, including when such goods or services or both are used in the course or furtherance of business. In that, explanation is also provided. For the purpose of clause C and D, the expression construction includes reconstruction, renovation, additions or alterations or repairs to the extent of capitalization to the said immovable property. My dear friends, finally it was held that the structures are used in the course or furtherance of taxable business, capitalized as plant and machinery. The applicant is entitled to claim input tax credit on the GST paid for goods and services used in their construction. My dear friends, it was held in Authority for Advance Ruling, Kerala, Neeta Gelatin India Limited, Indre, Kerala 19/2025. GST Outlook number 3. My dear friends, is a case concerning Calcutta High Court in Amit Agarwal versus Assistant Commissioner CGST and CX WPA 7788 of 2025. My dear friends, it was held initiation of proceedings under section 74 valid even if proceedings under section 61 were dropped on the basis of response filed by assessee. My dear friends, it was held by Calcutta High Court judgment. The facts of the case is dropping of scrutiny proceedings under section 61 subsection 3 does not prevent initiation of proceedings under section 74, especially in cases involving fraud, willful misstatement or suppression of fact. Now it is very important to understand what is first of all section 61 subsection 3 and section 74. In this case, let us see what is section 61 subsection 3. For the benefit of all the people who are listening, it is important to understand what is section 61 of the GST law. GST Outlook number 4. My dear friends, it is a case pertaining to Madhya Pradesh High Court judgment. Kalgat Sedwar Tollways Private Limited versus Union of India, writ petition number 25098 of 2025. It was held in this case, High Court dismissed writ petition as order passed by superintendent was appealable before appellate authority. My dear friends, the facts of the case is the petitioner challenged a GST demand and penalty order issued by the superintendent of CGST on grounds including violation of natural justice and that the order was contrary to law, facts and circumstances. My dear friends, the GST department argued that the order was appealable under statutory provisions, making the writ petition under section 226 of the Constitution of India non-maintainable. My dear friends, submission, if you decode, you can understand that the department is trying to say, now when you have the process of appeal, don't come to writ petition. So the question is whether this argument can be upheld. Accordingly, the court held that where no complex constitutional or legal issue is involved, the proper course is to exhaust statutory appellate remedies rather than invoke writ jurisdiction directly. My dear friends, the questions about factual errors, procedural irregularities or misapplication of law are within the jurisdiction of the appellate authority and need not be addressed at the writ stage. My dear friends, the writ petition was dismissed on grounds of availability of an adequate alternate remedy, reinforcing the principle that writ jurisdiction is not a substitute for statutory appeals in tax matters. It was held in Madhya Pradesh High Court, Kalgat Sedwar Tollways Private Limited versus Union of India. My dear friends, this is a landmark judgment to provide for that when statutory remedy is available, whether that should be exhausted to avail writ petition is definitely an important point to be considered. Accordingly, Madhya Pradesh High Court has clarified that you have to exhaust that and come to writ remedy where it is not a matter of legal complex question. GST Outlook number 5. My dear friends, this is a matter concerning Supreme Court in case of Godway Finicrafts versus State of Andhra Pradesh. Civil Appeal numbers 9490, 9491 of 2025. My dear friends, it was held. Supreme Court directed to consider review application, raising contention that 100% penalty couldn't have been imposed on assessee. My dear friends, the facts of the case is the assessee, a registered dealer, opted to pay GST under the composition scheme at 1% on turnover. However, revenue authorities rejected the assessee's eligibility on the ground that their turnover under the prior VAT regime exceeded the prescribed limit for the composition scheme. On this basis, the department imposed a GST liability at a standard rate of 28% along with interest and 100% penalty, treating the assessee's declaration as a case of willful non-disclosure, though not involving fraud. My dear friends, the assessee challenged the penalty and interest via writ petition, but the High Court dismissed it, not specially addressing the issue whether 100% penalty under section 122 was appropriately applied in a non-fraudulent case. My dear friends, it is very important to understand section 122 of the CGST or SGST or UGST Act. My dear friends, under section 122 of the CGST Act, chapter 19, offences and penalties, penalty for certain offences. It is provided under section 122. Under chapter 19, offence and penalties, under section 122, penalty for certain offences. Under that, it clearly provides section 122 subsection 1, where a taxable person who supplies any goods or services or both without issuance of any invoice or supplies and issues an incorrect or false invoice with respect to any such supply, like that it has provided many conditions under section 122. So 122 was appropriately can be applied for a non-fraudulent case is the question. According to my dear friends, the assessee filed a review application stating that although the penalty issue was included in the original writ petition, it was not argued clearly during the hearing. The Supreme Court found merit in this procedural lapse, noting that the plea regarding penalty deserved consideration. The Supreme Court held the assessee had the right to raise the issue of 100% penalty in the review petition. It is therefore set aside the High Court's dismissal of the review and directed that the matter be restored for proper adjudication on the penalty aspect. It was held in Supreme Court Judgment Godway Funnycrafts versus State of Andhra Pradesh, Civil Appeal numbers 9490, 9491 of 2025. GST Outlook number 6. It is a case pertaining to Supreme Court, Commissioner of CGST, Delhi West and others versus Rohit Gupta and others, diary number 31801 of 2025. My dear friends, it was held in the Supreme Court. Supreme Court dismisses revenue's plea challenging return of cash seized during such proceedings. My dear friends, the facts of the case is the Supreme Court dismissed the revenue special leave petition against the Delhi High Court order on grounds of laches, that is undue delay in filing the appeal, signaling the importance of procedural discipline in revenue litigation. My dear friends, the Delhi High Court had earlier directed the release of approximately 35.28 lakhs seized during a search under section 67 of the CGST Act, relying on its president Deepak Kandelwal, which allowed such relief in similar circumstances. My dear friends, it's very important before we understand the case, what is section 67 dealing with? Because in GST, my dear friends, under the GST Act, whether it is CGST or SGST or UTGST, section 67 deals with power of inspection, search and seizure. This was inserted by Finance Act number 2, 2024, 15 of 2024, dated 16/8/2024, with effect from 1/11/2024, SO 4253E, dated 27/9/2024. Not only that, it is enforced from 1/7/2017 through notification number 9/2017, Central Tax dated 28/6/2017. My dear friends, under this section, section 67, power of inspection, search and seizure provides for where, I quote the exact provisions of section 67, subsection 1 to highlight, where the proper officer not below the rank of joint commissioner has reason to believe, very, very important. Here also, like Income Tax Act, they use the phrase reason to believe that a taxable person has suppressed any transaction relating to supply of goods or services or both, or stock of goods in hand, or has claimed input tax credit in excess of his entitlement under this act, or has indulged in contravention of any of the provisions of this act or the rules made thereunder to evade tax under this act, or B, any person engaged in the business of transporting goods or owner or an operator of a warehouse or a godown or any other place in keeping goods which have escaped payment of tax or has kept his accounts or goods in such a manner as is likely to cause evasion of tax payable under this act. He may, very, very important, it is a discretionary power of the proper officer. He may authorize in writing any other officer of central tax to inspect any places of business of the taxable person or the person engaged in the business of transporting goods or the owner or the operator of warehouse or godown or any other place. My dear friends, this is about section 67. So section 67 provides for the power of inspection, search or seizure based on reason to believe. My dear friends, on the Supreme Court's query, revenue admitted the seized cash has already been returned to the assessee. Seized cash has already been returned to the assessee, indicating an ongoing prejudice or recoverability concerns which further weaken the basis of revenue's appeal. My dear friends, the Supreme Court strictly criticized the revenue for delays in completing the adjudication proceedings, highlighting inefficiency in enforcement under the CGST framework and emphasizing the need for timely conclusion of proceedings post-search. My dear friends, although the Supreme Court declined to tag this matter with similar pending cases, it left the larger question of law regarding legality of cash seizure under the GST Act open for future consideration, preserving scope for jurisdictional development. Was held in Supreme Court Commission of CGST Delhi West and others versus Rohit Gupta and others, diary number 31801 in 2025. GST Outlook number 7. My dear friends, it is a case pertaining to Delhi High Court. My dear friends, Ambika Traders versus Additional Commissioner, Adjudication DGGSTI CGST Delhi North, WPC number 4853 of 2025. It has been held that Section 74 of CGST Act, that is Consolidated SCN for multiple financial years, necessary to establish wrongful availment of input tax credit, held the Delhi High Court. My dear friends, Section 74 is a very, very important section, my dear friends. Before we understand the facts of the case, we have to understand what is Section 74. 74 deals with, under the GST law, under the GST Act, whether it is CGST or SGST or UTGST, under that Section 74 provides for determination of tax pertaining to the period up to financial year 2023-24, not paid or short paid or erroneously refunded or input tax credit wrongly availed, utilized by reason of fraud or any willful misstatement or suppression of fact. My dear friends, this is about Section 74 as a provision. If you see, the facts of the case here is the Delhi High Court held a single consolidated show cause notice covering multiple financial years valid under Section 74 of the CGST Act, especially where fraud is involved. This departs from the earlier case law that required segregation of any financial year. So what is happening is, under the GST department, quoting a single financial year, the GST department has started a practice where they issue show cause notice for multiple years on the same matter or different matters. The question here under the writ petition, whether issuing show cause notice for multiple years, whether it is constitutionally valid with a single show cause notice. So the court emphasized that fraudulent availment or utilization of input tax credit often spans multiple years. Accordingly, because it has a pervasive effect. So accordingly, since fraudulent patterns may only become evident when transactions across several years are examined together, a consolidated approach is both necessary and appropriate. So they say consolidated approach is both necessary and appropriate. Accordingly, the court distinguished between Section 73 and 74. My dear friends, for the benefit of all of you, I read Section 74. Now we should understand what is Section 73 to differentiate. My dear friends, Section 73 under Chapter 15, where under the demands and recovery, Section 73 deals with determination of tax pertaining to the period up to financial year 2023-24, not paid or short paid or erroneously refunded or input tax credit wrongly availed or utilized for any reason other than fraud or any willful misstatement or suppression of fact. My dear friends, under this, Section 73 and 74, while Section 73 subsection 10, very important, Section 73 subsection 10, What does section 73 subsection 10 provide for? Section 73 subsection 10 provides for proper officer shall issue the order under subsection 9 within 3 years from the due date for furnishing of annual return for the financial year to which the tax not paid or short paid or input tax credit wrongly availed or utilized relates to or within 3 years from the date of erroneous refund. My dear friends, under this, while we understand section 73 subsection 10, it is also important that we understand section 74 subsection 10. What does section 74 subsection 10 provide for? Section 74 subsection 10 provide for where the proper officer is of the opinion that the amount paid under clause 1 of subsection 8 or clause 1 of subsection 9 falls short of the amount actually payable, he shall proceed to issue the notice as provided for in subsection 1 in respect of such amount which falls short of the amount actually payable. My dear friends, section 73 we know, section 74 we know. Here in both the section, it refers to financial year. Very important. It refers to financial year. All the law students and practicing chartered accountant, cost accountant, company secretary, tax consultants across the nation should understand section 74 is a very, very important section when compared to section 73. Under that, in both the sections, they use the word financial year. Section 74 subsection 3, section 74 subsection 4 use broader terms like for any period. See, in 73 subsection 10, 74 subsection 10, when they talk about the time limit, they use the words financial year. Whereas under section 74 subsection 3, under section 74 subsection 4, in case of willful misstatement or suppression of facts or the fraud as the case may be, section 74 subsection 3 and section 74 subsection 4 gets attracted. Now it is very important to see what is section 74 subsection 4. Section 74 subsection 4 provides for service of statement under subsection 3 shall be deemed to be served of service of notice under subsection 1 of section 73, subject to the condition the grounds relied upon in the said statement, except the ground of fraud or any willful misstatement or suppression of facts, to evade tax for periods rather than those covered under subsection 1 or the same as are mentioned in the earlier notice. My dear friends, section 74 subsection 3 is again a very important section where a notice has been issued for any period. Very, very important. Notice is issued for any period under subsection 1, that is section 74 subsection 1. The proper officer who is notified under the GST law may, very important, the wording used is may, that means it is a discretionary power of the officer, serve a statement containing the details of the tax not paid or short paid or erroneously refunded or input tax credit wrongly availed or utilized for such periods other than those covered under subsection 1 on the person chargeable with tax. My dear friends, this statutory distinction indicates the legislative intent to allow notices covering more than 1 year in a fraud related case. So the explanation provided in section 74, when you look at it and interpret, is as though looks like for the notice can be issued for any period. If the notice can be issued for any period, the question here is whether notice should be issued, show cause notice should be issued separately for the periods covered under any period, or consolidated show cause notice has to be issued for any period covered under section 74 subsection 3, section 74 subsection 4. My dear friends, the court clarified, very, very important, court clarified that its decision is not consistent with the Supreme Court's view in Caltex India Limited 1966, which related to assessments under the Sales Tax Act. The CGST context, particularly involving fraud, justifies a different interpretative approach. My dear friends, given the serious allegations involving over 83 crores of a wrongful input tax credit, the court ruled that a consolidated notice was not just lawful but essential. So the petitioner's challenge was rejected. The cost of rupees 25,000 was imposed for raising an unsustainable objection. It was held in Delhi High Court in case of Ambika Traders versus Additional Commissioner Adjudication CGST Delhi North WP number 4853 of 2025. Signing off, Advocate Dr. M. Satyakumar.